Genesis chapter 37. And we're making another, this is the 10th really transition in Genesis, and this is the last one. And we start tonight talking about Joseph, and then next week we'll take another break and hear another rotten story about Judah and Tamar. And it's another one of those, what is that? Why is that chapter in the Bible? But we'll look at that, and then we'll be back to we'll be back to Joseph. But we're going to look at his dream tonight and talk about that a little bit. And I know the notes are a little bit more, but I'm not going to go into detail about a lot of stuff. We're going to look at it, and then you can look at the notes later and read it and study it if there are other. This is a familiar story of Joseph's dreams, and then him being sold into Egypt, into slavery. And one of the things we're going to look at tonight is favoritism. And it's always wrong. I used to, when I was teaching, a lot of times at the beginning of the year, I'll go over certain things with all the kids and ask them questions, and I'll let them ask me questions. And I heard quite a few times kids will say, Mr. Steele, do you have favorites? Do you pick favorites? And so we talk about a little bit about how they have. I say, you mean you've had teachers that have picked favorites and the whole class? Yes, the whole class would just blurt out, yes. And I say, well, to tell you the truth, I'm picking out my favorites starting now. This is the first week of school, and I'm picking out my favorites right now. But the truth is, you can be one of them. And then I would say, all right, here's what you have to do. If you want to be one of my favorites when you come in this class, here's what you have to do to be one of my favorites. I had the best time with them about talking about that. I would even let them tell some stories about, I said, no names, but tell me some stories about teachers that have had favorites. And it was like hands going up there. I wanted, and occasionally, of course, the name would slip out. And the kids were like, yeah. But sixth graders are so much fun. A lot of people didn't like middle school, but I love teaching sixth graders. They just, they still got a little bit of innocence and like children, but yet they're starting to grow up too. And I just love that grade. But one of their biggest issues was teachers who had favorites. They didn't like that. Well, it's never right to do that. Where do we often see favoritism? Family, yeah, with parents. Yes. It's hard not to, but even though we try not to. But yes, that's one place.
Jobs.
Yes. On the job, you see it. Well, is anybody going to say it?
Church.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I was having breakfast with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they said, I've heard that Dayspring is just a family church, that your family is the only one that gets to do anything.
No.
Yeah. He said that to me. I've heard that Dayspring is a family church, and your family's the only one that gets to do anything. I thought, well, that's because I can tell them what to do. I didn't get offended. I said, well, hey, what's wrong with having a family church? If my family's doing something, I can fuss at them if I want to. I can tell them to quit something if I want them to. If they get mad at me, where are they going to go? And so, I made a joke out of it. Then I said, look, whoever told you that, I don't think they're really basing that on the truth, because I don't think we've ever told anybody who wanted to participate in a ministry or be involved that unless they were kin to me, that was, that's the top job requirement. You got to be kin to me. I don't think we've never done that. But yes, church can be a place of favorites. The first church I worked at as a youth pastor, the complaint there was that unless you were in the top 10% of tithers for the church, you couldn't be a deacon. And I thought, well, Who knows that? But turns out they did know. Turns out everybody knew who the top givers were, and that was who got selected and for deacons. Maybe there was some truth to it. But churches get complaints about favoritism a lot of times. Just like families do, just like jobs do, just like schools and teachers, favoritism. Why, though, is it so harmful in a family? Why is favoritism so harmful in a family? Because that's what we're going to see tonight. Is favoritism in a family and the damage that it does. But before we look at it and read the verses, just in general, what do you think? Why is it so harmful? Who's it hurt more? The parents or the children?
People let it go.
Yeah.
Jealous.
Okay. Yeah. It does create jealousy, doesn't it? And it creates bitterness between people when there is favoritism. There's a lack of trust. And sometimes you can explain to a person, well, it's not that I love you less, but your behaviors keep me from having a certain kind of relationship with you. Because none of us can treat all of our kids the same. And behaviors do have to be dealt with, and we will get accused of it, of saying, well, you don't ever fuss at so-and-so, you're always fussing at me, but you don't ever fuss at them. You get those kind of comments. So you just have to address it. It doesn't mean you stop dealing with stuff. You just say, well, if you don't want the discipline, stop doing what's wrong. And then you won't get it. It can break up a family. So when we get to this story about Joseph, and we come right to that, let's read the first 4 verses. Chapter 37. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. So what do we see? Favoritism. Have we seen this before? Yes, we have. We've seen that in this family before, and we're seeing it again. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and he brought the bad report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. So okay, all right, this is the baby. Everybody knows. Well, he really wasn't the baby. He was next to Benjamin, next to the youngest. He was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic or a coat of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So Joseph is going to be used to fulfill the prophecy that was made to Abraham. That they would live in a land and be enslaved. He's talking about Egypt, but this prophecy has been made to Abraham. Your descendants are going to be taken as slaves, and they're going to live in a land that doesn't belong to them. This is where we see this start to happen with Joseph. And he's next to the youngest, the son of Rachel. Jacob loved Rachel more than he did Leah or the 2 maids, servants, they were concubines, but they became like wives. But Jacob loved Rachel the most, and it was obvious. There was some favoritism there too. And here he's 17 years old. He's out with his brothers, with the sheep. And we can start to see already, but we'll learn later, that Joseph got treated differently from the other sons. Like, they may have to go out every day and be out early and get the sheep and take them to the field and move them around wherever the grass was at. Whereas it looks like, as a teenager, Joseph may have been able to sleep in a lot of days. And then at some point, go out and join in and see what was going on. And then one day he brought this bad report. So he noticed something that they did or weren't doing. You know, imagine this typical thing where they've been out there working all morning. He shows up late and then wants to say they're not doing something right. How would you feel about that? I mean, have you ever worked with anybody where you're working your hind end off, and then they come in and like just nitpick at everything, and then they'll go tell somebody how you're not doing your job? Well, that's sort of what happened right here. At least it seems that way. Because Joseph was a teenager. He had not grown up to be the man that he will become after he goes through all this stuff. He's still a teenager, and he's not making all good decisions. But so anyway, whatever he noticed, he went back and told Jacob about it. And he had to know how his brothers felt about it. And he knew this was not going to help. I mean, he had to know that it wasn't going to help him in his relationship with them. And this is where we find out there is open favoritism going on. And it seems like as we read these first 4 verses, the guys already kind of had a feeling by what Joseph got away with and what was expected of them versus what was expected of him, that he was the favorite. Now, Benjamin was the baby. He was probably too young to be even out there at all. But they could already tell Joseph was getting the best of everything. But it says now they knew. When he got this coat, the special tunic, it was many colors. I mean, it was awesome from the description of it. When they saw that, they knew. It's like we've been suspecting it all along. But now we know. There's no doubt about it anymore. He's the favorite. He gets what he wants. We work, he sits around the house, and he gets everything he wants. This special robe, richly ornamented in bright colors. You know, imagine going to a Christmas celebration with your family, and one person gets money and another person gets socks. Eric's chuckling over there. But just imagine going to a Christmas celebration and all the family sitting around, and certain ones get really nice things and other ones get not so nice things. What do they think? Well, I know where I stand on the totem pole, as we say. I know what position I hold in this family. Well, that's what these boys thought. And everybody knew where they stood in relation to Joseph. So much so, the other brothers, it was such an obvious thing to them. It says they could not speak a kind word to him any longer. They were so filled with resentment, with jealousy, with bitterness. They couldn't even pretend anymore. You know, sometimes we get together with people and we're pretty upset. We don't really like them, and we feel like they've done us wrong, or it can even be family. Certainly can be work, and it can be church. But to be filled with that to the point that you can't even speak a kind word to that person. I heard something recently, and we're going to see it's true with these boys. The meanest thing that you can do to yourself is hate somebody else. Now think about that. Ain't that the truth? Because when you are so resentful towards somebody, that you hate them, who ends up not being able to sleep at night because it's all you think about? Who can't have any peace because every time you see them, it starts going over and over in your mind again about how sorry that person is. And so, the meanest thing we can do to ourselves, the harshest thing we can do to ourselves is to hate somebody else. And Joseph's brothers hated him. We don't know when it started. According to this story, it might have started with the bad report when they were working and he wasn't. And he takes back a bad report. It may have started with that. But the coat, it just seemed to put this hatred, this unrelenting resentment in high gear. Listen, people can do hard things, harsh things to you. And there's no reason for it. There's no excuse for what they did. They just got upset with you or somebody else, and so they want you to pay for it. And they can hurt you. People can hurt you. But to let it get to the point, and we see that in this story, Matthew talks about it, that to hate someone is like killing them. You know, we say don't commit murder, but if you hate somebody, you've already killed them in your heart. And that's the story right here. So let's read verses 5 through 11. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaf stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." Imagine. You and your dreams. I'm surprised one of them just didn't take a stick and smack him upside the head right there. He said, "Look, I had this dream, and every one of y'all are bowing down to me." In verse 8, and his brothers said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? Now, you know, we read this, but they're probably shouting this and shaking their fists. Do you think you're going to rule over us? Seriously? What's wrong with you? You're the youngest one out here. Are you crazy? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I've dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." Now, who do you think the 11 stars are? Yeah, this is them. He's telling them this dream that God gave him. In verse 10, so he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him. But his father kept the matter in mind. And so, talking about adding fuel to the fire. Remember, he's a teenager. He doesn't have the humility or the discernment that he needs yet. God gave him a dream, and it was a dream that God gave him. It doesn't say God said, "Okay, go tell this to your brothers. Go tell this to your daddy of what all I'm going to do and who you're going to be in as far as the role of Israel." But God gave him the dream. Now, have you ever given a biblical principle or quoted a verse to someone who wasn't ready to hear it? I've done a few marriage counselings where the wife was a much stronger believer than the husband was. And a couple of times, you know what came out of it? The husband, I'm going to paraphrase it just real quick. "I'm so sick and tired of her preaching to me all the time. You know, I'll do something or I'll say something and she'll quote a verse to me. I'm so sick of hearing it." You know, sometimes it's not that we know the right thing or that God has revealed something to us. And it's not that we shouldn't tell anybody, but isn't there a matter of discretion and humility of knowing what to say and when to say it, and when to be quiet and listen, and when to wait on God? Could Joseph have told his brothers about his dream in a better way? Yes. I mean, just read this. He goes, hey, let me tell y'all a dream. You all going to bow down to me. I mean, he could have done that in a different way. He could have waited, because God was going to show him this. But again, God gave him the dream, and we can see later on, when they are in Egypt, when they come to Joseph, they will remember. Now, this is causing all kind of anger and resentment and envy and jealousy. But when it comes down to the rubber meeting the road, when they are in Egypt, and Joseph is this high-ranking official, and they do bow down to him, they're going to remember what the dream was about. So on the other hand, where we say, okay, Joseph, you were rude and arrogant. On the other hand, God was able to use it, but it just took time. Joseph wasn't the only one that needed humility, was he? His 11 brothers needed it. And it would take a famine to get them to that point. And so it's hard to say here which would have been the right thing to do. Because again, we make mistakes. And maybe Joseph did this in the wrong way, but God's power overcame it, didn't it? And he's still able to accomplish his will. And that's what we talk about a lot, how God is able to do that. But twice it says in here, they hated him all the more. So everything he did, everything he said, because the favoritism was there. As they grew to hate him, and then he told them about his dreams, they hated him all the more. And so they weren't going to go along with it. They didn't want to hear it. Let's read verses 12 through 35. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. He sent them all the way back. He still owned some land there. They didn't live there anymore, but he still owned land there, and they were feeding their sheep there. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Then he said to him, please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? So he said, I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. So he was persistent about it. He got lost, but God sent somebody to direct him. Don't know who this is. Sent somebody to direct him, and he was persistent about getting to his brothers. Verse 18. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. So hatred leads to what? Murder. I mean, they see him coming. Their younger brother, they see him coming, and far enough off, he ain't even got there yet. They're already thinking, okay, this is it. This is the time. We're not listening to any more dreams from him. He's not going to come here and then turn around and go back home and tell our father about how bad things are going out here. Let's kill him. Let's finally get rid of this rascal. And that's what they were planning to do. Verse 19, then they said to one another, look, the dreamer is coming. That was his nickname now. The dreamer. Here comes the dreamer. You know, and it was a mockery. Here comes the dreamer. Coming back again. Come therefore, let us kill him now and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. This is 11 of his brothers. We shall see what will become of his dreams. You see the mockery in this and the resentment? They don't like him. And they don't want to hear from him anymore. Verse 21, but Reuben, the oldest, heard it. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness. And do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father. So Reuben said, no, look, that's too far, guys. No, I know we don't like him, but that's too much. Let's don't kill him, because then we'll have his blood on our hands. We'll be guilty. Let's don't do it ourselves. Let's just put him in a pit and let him die. We won't feel as bad about that. But he told them all of that so that he could go back later and get him out of the pit and take him back to his father. Now, why would Reuben want to do that? Reuben is still trying to make up with his father because he went in and slept with his father's concubine or wife. And he was on the blacklist from doing that, and he would stay on it. But Reuben's thinking, if I can deliver Joseph and we don't kill him, because we know how much our dad loves him, he's the favorite. So if I can get him back and say I saved his life, then maybe my father will. Sounds like the wives trying to get Jacob to love or honor them. Now Reuben is trying to get his daddy to love him again or to honor him. So he says, hey, if I can save Joseph, maybe that will happen. I think I'm going to stop there tonight, and we'll finish this up next week, and then we'll go into Judah and Tamar. But I mean, what do you think about this? What's the thing that stands out to you about this story with Joseph and his brothers? And of course, we'll read next week, they ended up selling him to a caravan. And all of this is God's plan. It all seems so bad, but it all fits into God's plan. Because where did God need Joseph to get to? Egypt. To save Israel. And all of this evil, all of this envy, all of this hatred, even in that, God is going to accomplish His will. So, for us, we see all this evil going around us, going on around us. People who don't care. And we think, God, how are you ever going to be able to accomplish His will? Your will, oh God. But He will. He will. He always will. There ain't anything that's going to keep you out of heaven. There ain't anything that's going to keep you from being with Him. No. The world is evil. It's going to get worse. But there ain't anything that can keep us from seeing Jesus. It can keep us from going to heaven. And so we don't get discouraged. We get upset. We get bothered. We don't like it. We try to deal with stuff. But at the root of our faith is we know that God is God and He is going to accomplish His will. And when we get to heaven and look back on all of it, we'll say, God, I couldn't see your hand at that time, but your hand was still guiding everything that happened. And you brought me home, and now I'm with you. Joseph could not, when his brothers grabbed him, threw him in that pit, sold him, I doubt as a teenager if he could see God's hand at work in him. But later on, he'd look back, and what would he tell his brothers? You meant it for evil, but what's the rest of that? God meant it for good. It's hard to look at it that way sometimes, ain't it? Until after things happen. It's hard when we're going through stuff to say, God, this is awful, but I know you're a good God, that you love me, and that you mean all of this for good. Sometimes we have to get through things and look back on it to see God's hand in it. But if we're His children, His hand is we're always in His hand. So His hand is always in it. He's involved. And He won't leave us to deal with stuff by ourselves. Well, let's pray. Lord, thank you for this chance to look into your word. Thank you for these dear friends who so faithfully come out on Wednesday night to pray together and study your word. I thank you for each of them, oh God. What a blessing they are. And I pray that they too get something out of this that encourages them, that helps them for tomorrow and through the rest of the week, that this time we spend together is a blessing in their lives. But I thank you for them, and I pray, oh God, that each one of these dear people will know your grace and your presence with them, and that you are working all these things out for your glory and our good. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.